Today on The Intelligent Asset, a discussion on leveraging artificial intelligence in asset-intensive enterprises. Welcome to The Intelligent Asset, a podcast on digitizing enterprise asset management, developing intelligent interactions, and building systems of intelligence for asset operations. For industry professionals who work in EAM and facilities management across transport, public sector, utilities, manufacturing, and large enterprises. We want to tie the global challenges we all share to the world of EAM and how we can make change for the better, building a more sustainable collective future. And this episode is brought to you by IBM Maximo, Australasia's leading provider of sustainability solutions for asset-intensive enterprises. In this part, which is part 2, I'm joined again by Roy Lorenzen, and I'm Sam Williams, and we'll continue the discussion from here. It's probably fair to say that actually starting with the process and process improvement first is the most logical place to start, rather than trying to apply AI to something. Maybe what's your point of view around, is it technology first, or is it process improvement first?
I think it should always be business outcome first, right? So what is the business outcome that we're trying to solve here? Is it we want to move ourselves up the asset maturity curve and we want to get from this step to that step? And understanding kind of what that really is, what is the business challenge that you're trying to actually solve, and then bring the technology in to help solve that. Because if you don't understand what it is you're trying to achieve in the first place, you won't know whether or not you've succeeded or not. If success is, oh yay, we've got AI in our business, then you haven't really helped your business in any way, shape, or form.
What are some of the cultural dimensions to consider in this mix? Because I guess coming back to your very first point about robots taking over the world and people's fears that are associated with that, are there any observations that you have from a cultural standpoint in terms of the adoption of smarter algorithms to, supposedly it's to improve our lives, but I imagine that for a lot of people they find this threatening?
Yeah, there's always a big fear factor involved with some of these things, right? Because you're kind of bringing something in that people don't necessarily understand. So I think some of the things that you really need to consider is making sure that you're bringing people on the journey with you. So offering up sort of, training sessions or understanding sessions around, we're bringing this piece of technology and this is what it's going to do. This is how it's going to affect your day-to-day or kind of our business as a whole. And making sure that everybody's kind of clear around why you're actually trying to do this, rather than kind of just go, hey, here's a new piece of technology, you've got to kind of live with it. And making sure that understanding is really there as well. And that kind of plays out in terms of from an adoptability perspective, but also kind of making sure that it is going to fit into the business and actually achieving the right outcome as well. Because some of those algorithms can get pretty complex, and if you can't kind of explain it to somebody, in simple plain English, then you're just not going to be able to understand why it's kind of required in the first place, or what it is actually trying to be able to achieve. But also it makes it very difficult for you to be able to kind of then maintain it and manage it moving forward as well.
Talk to listeners a little bit about transparency in the models and the importance of being able to interrogate the algorithm effectively.
Yeah, so with the complex algorithms, that can be enabling, I guess, some of us normal people to understand kind of what it is that they're actually trying to do. It can be pretty hard. So I think it's kind of coming back to that before you go and create the algorithm. Simply writing down, what are we actually trying to achieve from this algorithm? What is it, the output that we actually kind of want? Making sure that it is explainable, I guess, in terms of this is what we're actually wanting it to do before you then move on and kind of create a little flow chart potentially around what that actually is, and then actually get into the coding side of things. Because when it kind of then comes to, well, if I put this data through, it's giving me this output. You can kind of go back to your definition of what it is trying to do to go, oh, well, that makes sense, right? Because we said if it's this, then it's going to give us that outcome. So I think it's having the transparency, but also the explainability around those algorithms is really important to make sure that everybody can then kind of get that buy-in again to why you're sort of using this technology.
I guess in some ways it's not too dissimilar to interrogating a 25-year-old or 25-year experienced veteran who just has a gut instinct as to what is wrong with this particular piece of equipment based on listening to it. Often it's quite hard for them to explain, just how they came to that conclusion. And that's, I guess, a lot of the implication of the use of artificial intelligence is actually delving into our reasoning and unpicking some of the things that we talk about in terms of our gut and our sense of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Sam, in terms of, you're taking somebody who's been around these assets for 40 odd years, and just by listening to them, they understand what's wrong with them, if they're good, if they're bad, or, they can give you a scale of 1 to 5. Trying to then translate that into a decision-making tree around how did you get to that decision can be very, very difficult. And same with teenagers, really, right? Because they don't actually give you any information. It's just cause. It's cause it is, right? Whereas for the 40-year-old veteran out there, it's like, well, yeah, he could probably explain it, but it's kind of, it might be either a real deep level explanation because he gets down to I noticed that the bearing had this slight whine on it or something like that, or kind of just, that's the sound it makes, and in 2 weeks' time it's going to fail.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge is also um, making that information accessible in a way that a younger, less experienced person can interrogate. And coming back to an earlier point that you were making in terms of the questions that you're actually asking of the data and being able to discern whether this is actually meaningful or garbage that you're getting. I guess it's a different sort of training potentially for those new users to help them uh, make sure that what it's they're getting in terms of answers are meaningful.
Yeah,
Do you have any point of view on that?
yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes back to that trust factor as well. So, like you say, there could be a whole bunch of garbage in there. So, when it comes to implementing AI, it's not just right, we've done it, cool, it's there now. In 2 years' time, we'll come and update the software or something like that. It's going to be a continual program that you're going to be involved with in terms of basically, because the more data you feed it, the more it will learn, the more refined you can then start to make your algorithms, and the more you can then start to trust kind of what it is starting to say as well. And then likewise, you got a different training that you need to do for the people who are going to actually be using it as well, because they still why they might not need to know every single little detail like somebody who has gone through the process 10, 20 years ago. They need to be able to understand what it is, what the outcome is, and make sense of whether or not it is garbage, or whether it is something that is actual factual from itself. So yeah, it becomes this continuous cycle basically of training and learning and extending out basically its capability.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept in terms of trust and uh, you know the heuristics that we use, not just in an engineering context, uh, but also in terms of belief that something is true or correct. That it is actually a process of these systems actually allowing us to trust them or developing trust in them on an iterative cycle
Yeah.
in order for them to be meaningful and actually build a true system of intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the saying? Trust is something which is always earned, right? So like you don't just kind of blindly trust people, or some people may do, but it's always something that's earned. So that's why where that iterative process kind of comes into play is kind of it's learning. You're also learning along the way as well in terms of basically its capabilities, because kind of as we sort of said earlier, it's only as good as the data it has and the training that it has actually gone through. So making sure that you kind of get those things right enables you to go along the journey with it and sort of be able to kind of have that trust as you're going through that process.
Okay. Um, so, just to sum up, then, Roy, what would you say are the key considerations if you're looking at AI as a topic for your asset-intensive enterprise?
I think that the key considerations are understanding the business problem that you're trying to solve, um, ensuring AI or some part of AI is kind of the right tool, having I guess a strategy, an internal strategy around kind of collaboration and learning and continuous improvement or evolving basically as you're going through it. So you really kind of need to buy into, or you need to really understand kind of what that actually means, right? Because it becomes a journey. It doesn't just become a 3-month project. It becomes something that you're actually starting to use and becomes part of your business as you're going to move forward. Communication and collaboration, I think, is another key thing, because it's going to touch on so many different parts of the business, right? It's not just an IT project, but you need IT involved. You need those key stakeholders to make sure you're making the right decisions moving forward. And because it's a business outcome that you're really looking for, you need key buy-in from those stakeholders as well to make sure you go from there. And you need to communicate out basically to everybody kind of what you're actually doing, right? You can't kind of keep this thing contained. You need to really have the buy-in of the whole organization, um, and kind of just test test and optimize, right? Keep test and test and test and test, because that's how you're going to build up basically that trust, but also you're going to build up an understanding on whether or not it's actually even going to work for you, basically moving forward, or whether you need to try something different. Don't be scared to try different technologies as well, because you know one technology might work in one space but might not work in another. So you need to be you need to embrace different technologies that could be used as part of that. But I think you kind of just need to have that culture of continuous learning or continuous improvement. The word culture gets thrown around a lot, and it has different meanings for different people. But it's about kind of creating that environment, basically, to be able to do what you need to be able to do, um, to try different things, to adopt new technologies, to identify other areas where you think AI might kind of come in, and not be scared to kind of go down that path. And you might not be successful, so you might fail, but just because you fail doesn't mean it's not a success, right? Because what you've identified is that isn't really going to actually work for you, but you can learn from that and then move on to something different. So I think there's some kind of key parts in there around it. First part around, do your work up front, understand exactly what it is you're trying to achieve. The actual implementation part of it, you'll probably find, is the easy bit. It'll be kind of the giving you the ability to kind of be able to change and have that continuous improvement side of it.
Super. I think that's been, well, at least from my perspective, an informative discussion, Roy. So thank you very much for your time. And just to highlight the fact that Certus Digital have a range of different services and capabilities to be able to help people on this journey. Um, Roy Can you share some of those particular services?
Yeah, absolutely. So, continuous improvement is something that we really drive and have within Certus Digital ourselves. So, I'm very keen to work with customers who are wanting to be able to provide that. And also, we have a number of partners who, with different technology sets that we're able to kind of bring in and utilize from that aspect. And I guess one of the key services that we provide is kind of helping you along that journey. So, helping you to kind of identify the best way to be able to solve your business problems and take you all along that journey as well.
Thanks, everyone. Uh, and check out the next episode in the Intelligent Asset.
Thanks.